Have you ever watched a software project start out all neat and simple and then just spiral into this tangled, chaotic mess? Yeah, we've all been there. But what if I told you there's a way to stop that chaos before it even starts? Well, today we're diving into the architectural blueprints that bring order to code, software design patterns.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the why these patterns are so important. Then we'll jump into the three main types: creational, structural, and behavioral. And we'll wrap it all up with a key takeaway you can use in your own work.
All right, part one, the blueprint for better code. Let's really get to the heart of the problem these patterns were created to solve.
Let's just kick things off with a fundamental question, right? It doesn't matter if you're a senior developer or just getting started, you've definitely felt this pain. A project gets bigger, you add a few features, and boom, suddenly, making one tiny change feels like you're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in the dark. So why does this keep happening?
Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. You wouldn't try to build a skyscraper without a detailed architectural plan, would you? Of course not. And it's the exact same idea for software. When you don't have a solid design blueprint, you're just winging it. And that improvisation leads directly to fragile, complicated code that nobody wants to touch. And this is exactly where design patterns come to the rescue. Think of them as proven, reusable solutions to the same old problems that pop up again and again in software design. Now, here's the really crucial part. These are not just chunks of code you can copy and paste. They're more like high-level concepts or templates for solving a problem that you then tailor to your own specific needs. To help us get a handle on all of these ideas, they're neatly organized into three main categories. Each one tackles a completely different part of how software is built. So, let's dive into our first category, creational patterns. As the name suggests, this is all about creating objects in a smart, flexible way without revealing all the complicated logic behind the scenes.
Let's look at a few of the heavy hitters here. First, you've got the Singleton pattern. This one's your go-to when you absolutely, positively need to make sure there's only one instance of something, like a single connection to a database. Then there's the factory pattern, which is a total lifesaver when your code needs to create an object, but you don't know exactly what kind of object until the program is actually running. And finally, the builder pattern. This one's amazing for breaking down the construction of really complex objects, letting you build them step by step.
I love this kitchen analogy because it just nails the factory pattern. Imagine a waiter, they just go to the station and ask for pasta. They don't need to know the recipe, the ingredients, or how to cook it. They just trust the pasta factory to whip up the right dish. That separation of concerns makes the whole kitchen run so much smoother.
All right, next up, our second category, structural patterns. Now, these patterns are all about smart organization, how we can put different objects and classes together to form bigger, more powerful structures.
So let's check out a few key ones. The adapter pattern is incredible. It's basically a translator that lets two incompatible parts of your code talk to each other. The decorator pattern is super cool because it lets you add new features to an object on the fly without ever touching its original code. And then there's the facade, which is like putting a simple, clean front door on a really complex building, giving you an easy way in. The analogy for the adapter pattern is just perfect. You've got your European blender, you're in an American kitchen, and the plugs just don't match. What do? You grab that universal power adapter. It sits right in the middle, translating between the two so they can work together perfectly. That is exactly what this pattern does for your code. And that brings us to our third and final category, behavioral patterns. This one is all about smart communication, figuring out how different objects can talk to each other and share responsibilities effectively.
Let's look at what we've got here. The observer pattern is huge for anything event-driven. When a bunch of different objects all need to know when something changes in another object. The strategy pattern gives you incredible flexibility by letting you define a whole family of algorithms and then swap them in and out as needed. And the command pattern is really clever. It actually turns a request into its own standalone object, which gives you a ton of control over how and when that request gets handled.
So let's head back to our kitchen one last time. That order up bell, that is a textbook observer pattern in action. The chef finishes a dish and rings the bell. They don't have to track down every single waiter and tell them individually. Nope. All the waiters are observing the bell, and when it rings, they know it's time to act. It's a beautifully clean and decoupled way to communicate.
Okay, let's bring it all home. Part 5, your design takeaway. So after all that, why does knowing about these blueprints actually matter?
Look, using design patterns is not just some academic exercise. It has massive, real-world payoffs. For starters, it makes your code way more readable, not just for you, but for your whole team. It also makes your software dramatically easier to maintain and update down the line.
Plus, it lets you add new features without worrying about breaking everything. And maybe most importantly, it stops you from wasting time reinventing the wheel to solve problems that smart people have already solved for us.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Are these blueprints just a bunch of rigid rules, or are they actually tools for creativity? It's easy to look at them and think they're restrictive. But honestly, great developers know they're a proven toolkit. Understanding these patterns doesn't limit your creativity, it unleashes it by freeing you up to focus on the truly innovative parts of what you're building. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.